The grand convocation chamber of the Cathar Imperium was a monument to geological time and galactic conquest. Its walls were not built, but carved from the heart of a captive moon. The stone a deep, star-flecked obsidian that drank the light and gave back nothing but a cold, profound sense of antiquity. Pillars thick as ancient star freighters rose to a vaulted ceiling where a slow, silent vortex of captured nebular gas swirled, casting shifting, godlike shadows upon the assembly below. Here, on thrones of polished meteorite iron, sat the praetors of the Cathar, beings whose civilization had charted the spiral arms of the galaxy when the home star of the humans was still a formless cloud of dust and ambition. At the chamber's heart, a holographic projection of the disputed veil-adjacent territories shimmered, a wound of contested space between them and the silent hegemony. The air, heavy with ozone and the scent of cold metal, was thick with the unsaid, the feared, and the inevitable. Praetor Vorlag, his 4 eyes blinking in slow, deliberate succession, rested his tri-fingered hands upon the cool, unforgiving surface of his throne. His carapace, a lifetime of hardened resolve and genetic prestige, felt unusually thin today, as if the very gravity of the moment sought to press through it and crush the being within. He had seen the Imperium through a dozen territorial disputes, 3 rebellions, and the pacification of the Outer Rim worlds. He had seen fleets burn like dying stars against the black, and he had heard the roar of triumph echo through this very hall. But the silence that preceded this conflict was different. It was a brittle, waiting thing, and at its center was not the familiar, honorable threat of the Silence, but a new, unnerving variable, the humans. They are an infestation of sentiment and ill-conceived logic, Lord Admiral Kalen's voice boomed, his own form a stark, brutal silhouette against the swirling nebula above. Kalen was of the warrior caste, his carapace scarred with the ritual marks of countless campaigns. His mind saw the galaxy as a theorem of force and application, a problem to be solved with overwhelming power. They have existed as a spacefaring species for a breath, a mere flicker in the span of Cathar history. Their technology is a patchwork of stolen principles and desperate innovation, and now they dare to place their single, absurd vessel in the path of our grand armada. A murmur of assent rippled through the praetors. Kalen's words resonated with the core of their identity. The Cathar were a people of legacy, of strength proven over millennia. They understood the dance of empires, the cold calculus of attrition and dominance. The humans did not fit the equation. They were a biological paradox, a species that had clawed its way out of a gravity well on a world that actively tried to kill them, only to then export their own internal chaos to the stars. They formed alliances based on fleeting emotional currents, broke them over matters of abstract principle, and waged wars with a ferocity that was matched only by their sudden, inexplicable compassion. They were, to the Cathar mind, dangerously unpredictable. Their ship, this Silence Asterisk, Kalen spat the human word as if it were poison, is an affront. A single vessel, bristling with what their primitive scans undoubtedly perceive as threatening weapon emplacements. It is a child's toy, a piece of driftwood placed in the path of a tidal wave. They believe it gives them a seat at the table of galactic powers. I say it makes them a target. Vorlag shifted his weight, the movement sending a low, scraping sound across the chamber floor that momentarily drew the attention of the assembly. And yet, Lord Admiral, Vorlag's voice was lower, a resonant baritone that carried the weight of ages. It is a piece of driftwood that has chosen its position with sublime precision. It sits not in our path, nor in the silence, but precisely on the gravitationally neutral line between our assembling forces. To engage it is to risk a premature engagement with the hegemony. To ignore it is to allow a lesser species to dictate the terms of our battlefield. Kalen's mandible twitched in irritation. It is a tactical nuisance, nothing more, a display of bravado from a species that has not yet learned the proper meaning of fear. Their history is one of self-inflicted violence. They have spent more time warring with themselves than they have reaching for the stars. They are not strategists. They are brawlers who have stumbled into an arena of masters. Or perhaps, Vorlag mused, his inner 2 eyes focusing on the holographic representation of the lone human ship, a simple, elegant sliver of light, they have learned something from their endless internal conflicts that we in our long and stable reign have forgotten. This suggestion was met with a deep, stony silence. It was a near heretical thought. The Cathar did not forget, Our history was inscribed in the very architecture of their cities, in the genetic memory passed down through their spawning lines. They were the sum of their triumphs, a monument to enduring strength. To suggest a young, chaotic race possessed a wisdom they lacked was to challenge the foundation of their entire civilization. What could they possibly teach us, old friend? Kalen asked, his tone softening slightly, a rare concession to his long association with Vorlag. Honor, we have defined it. strategy. We have written the foundational texts used by half the quadrant. Endurance, we have watched stars be born and die. Humility, Vorlag said, the word falling into the vast chamber like a single stone into a perfectly still, bottomless lake. They are a species that lives with the constant awareness of its own fragility. Their planet is a maelstrom of shifting continents, violent weather, and biological competition. Their individual lives are fleeting. From this, they have developed a peculiar resilience. They do not think in terms of millennia, Lord Admiral. They think in moments, and they can make a single moment change the course of history. We see a single ship. They may see a fulcrum upon which the fate of this entire conflict rests. A younger praetor from the core worlds, his carapace still gleaming with the sheen of unweathered ambition, rose to speak. Praetor Vorlag speaks with wisdom, but perhaps with an excess of caution. The reports from our intelligence cadres are clear. Human technology, while effective in its own sphere, lacks the foundational power of our gravitic singularity drives and phased energy carapaces. Their ship's energy signature is unusual, but not overwhelming. It broadcasts no threat that our sensors can adequately interpret as a weapon of significance. It is, by all measures, an advanced diplomatic vessel or a scout, posturing as a warship. It is named *silence*, Vorlag repeated softly, as if the word itself held the key. Humans are a species of noise, of constant communication, of endless broadcasting. For them to name their greatest military creation, silence, is a statement of profound intent. We are assuming it is a declaration of the silence it will impose upon its enemies. What if it represents a different kind of silence altogether? The debate continued for what felt like an eternity, a slow, grinding process of weighing pride against prudence. Kalen and his faction argued for immediate action. To dispatch a portion of the fleet, obliterate the human vessel with a single, overwhelming volley, and send a message to the galaxy that the space between the Cathar and their enemies was sacred ground. It would be a clinical, efficient act of pest control, and it would demonstrate to the Silence the unshakable resolve of the Imperium. Vorlag and a smaller contingent of elder praetors argued for observation, for communication, to hail the vessel, to understand its purpose, to treat the unknown not as a threat to be extinguished, but as a puzzle to be solved. To do otherwise, Vorlag argued, was to act with the same impulsive blindness they accused the humans of possessing. In the end, as it so often did, the path of aggression held the greater appeal. It was simple, direct, and aligned with millennia of Cathar doctrine. But Vorlag's words had planted a seed of doubt. A compromise was reached. Lord Admiral Kalen would proceed with his grand strategy against the Silent hegemony, but first, a single battle praetor and his vessel, the Indomitable would be dispatched to the human ship. Its commander would be Vorlag himself, tasked with delivering the Imperium's ultimatum. He was to offer them a single chance to withdraw. If they refused, the Indomitable was authorized to demonstrate the Imperium's displeasure. The demonstration was to be precise, non-lethal if possible, but sufficient to cripple the human vessel and remove it from the board. Vorlag knew what this meant. It was a leash, but a long one. The decision to fire and the consequences of that act would ultimately rest with him. As the convocation concluded and the great chamber began to empty, leaving him alone with the swirling ghosts of the nebula above, Vorlag felt a cold certainty settle deep within his being. He was being sent to the edge of a precipice, and he did not believe, for a single moment, that the humans had chosen their position there by accident. The transit to the contested zone was a silent, tense affair. The Indomitable was a masterpiece of Cathar engineering, a vessel designed to convey absolute power. Its hull was a dark, jagged alloy that seemed to devour light, its shape an angular testament to brutal functionality. It did not glide through the void. It tore through it, warping space-time before its prow like a predator parting tall grass. On its bridge, surrounded by the quiet, efficient hum of its singularity core and the focused intensity of his crew, Vorlag felt the familiar comfort of Cathar superiority. Their ships were an extension of their philosophy, direct, powerful, and uncompromising. Then they saw it. The human ship, *silence*. It hung in the void exactly where the long-range sensors had placed it, a perfect needle of pale, luminescent material against the black. It was not large, perhaps only a fraction of the mass of the Indomitable. It had no visible weapon ports, no defensive shielding that flickered with telltale energy, no aggressive lines. Its design was one of profound, almost unnerving simplicity. It was smooth, seamless, and radiated a soft, internal white-blue light, as if it were a vessel carved from captured starlight. There was a grace to it that was alien to Cathar design, a sense of purpose that was not overtly martial. It did not look like a warship. It looked like a tool for a purpose Vorlag could not yet comprehend. "We are within hailing distance, Praetor," the communications officer reported, his voice a low, disciplined rumble. "Open a channel, full diplomatic protocols. I will speak to them myself," Vorlag commanded, rising from his command throne and moving to the central hololith. The channel opened with an almost instantaneous response, a lack of delay that suggested the humans had been waiting. A figure coalesced in the blue light of the hololith. It was a human female, her form clad in a simple, dark uniform that bore no rank insignia Vorlag could recognize. Her face was pale, her features symmetrical, and her eyes, a deep, unreadable shade of brown, met his own across the void without a flicker of fear or deference. There was a stillness about her, a complete lack of the nervous energy the Cathar had come to associate with the younger species. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Confederacy vessel *Silence*, she said, her voice calm and perfectly modulated. The translation software was flawless, rendering her words in the high, formal dialect of the Cathar preterate. "To whom do I have the honor of speaking?" The sheer audacity of her calm professionalism was disarming. Vorlag had expected bluster or fear or perhaps a plea for understanding. He had not expected this serene, unshakable composure. "I am Praetor Vorlag of the Cathar Imperium, commanding the warship Indomitable will *," he replied, his own voice resonating with the authority of his station. "You are in a declared zone of military contention, Ambassador. Your presence here is a violation of interstellar protocols and an obstruction to the strategic imperatives of the Cathar Imperium. I am here to offer you one opportunity to remove your vessel from this sector. Do so now, and you may depart unharmed." The human Rostova did not react. She simply listened, her head tilted slightly as if considering a philosophical point. "We are aware of our position, Praetor Vorlag," she said finally. "We are also aware of the assembling Cathar and Cylon forces. We are not here to obstruct. We are here to observe and to offer an alternative." Vorlag felt a surge of irritation, the same emotion Kalen had displayed in the convocation. It was the condescension that rankled him, the implicit suggestion that the Cathar, in their infinite history, required an alternative from a species that had barely learned to walk among the stars. "The Imperium does not require alternatives. We have a clear and righteous path. This dispute will be settled according to the ancient rites of combat as it has been for 10,000 years. Your interference is not welcome." "The ancient rites of combat," Ambassador Rostova repeated, the words carrying a strange, almost sorrowful weight, "will result in the destruction of countless vessels and the loss of innumerable lives on both sides. It will expend resources that neither the Cathar Imperium nor the Cylon hegemony can easily replace. It will create a power vacuum in this quadrant that will be filled by lesser, more opportunistic powers. In the end, the border will be redrawn a few parsecs in one direction or the other, a temporary solution until the next generation's pride demands a similar sacrifice. This is the cycle your history has shown us, Praetor." Vorlag was momentarily speechless. She had just summarized the fatalistic, cyclical nature of his people's history with a clarity that was both insulting and brutally accurate. He felt his authority being subtly undermined, not by a threat, but by an observation. On the bridge of the Indomitable will his crew shifted uncomfortably. They were warriors bred for direct confrontation. This verbal and psychological maneuvering was foreign territory. "Your understanding of our history is irrelevant," Vorlag said, his voice hardening. "This is your final warning. Withdraw your vessel, or we will be forced to remove it for you." A feed from Lord Admiral Kalen's flagship appeared in the corner of Vorlag's command interface. Kalen's face was a mask of cold fury. "Enough of this talk, Vorlag. Their arrogance is boundless. Fire a warning shot. A Class 2 disruptor pulse across their bow. Let them feel the heat of a real warship." Vorlag hesitated. It was a direct order from the Lord Admiral. To refuse would be insubordination, but something in the human ambassador's steady gaze gave him pause. It was not the look of someone bluffing. It was the look of someone who knew something he did not. "Ambassador Rostova," Vorlag said, his voice a low growl of finality, "I am now ordered to fire upon your vessel as a demonstration of our intent. I urge you for the final time to move." The ambassador's expression did not change. If anything, a flicker of what looked like disappointment crossed her features. "We had hoped it would not come to this," she said, her voice still impossibly calm. "We advise against that course of action, Praetor, for your own sake." The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of that statement shattered the last of Vorlag's patience. "For our own sake," he thundered. "You dare to threaten the Cathar Imperium?" "It is not a threat," she replied softly. It is a statement of fact. Please stand down. Fire the warning shot, Kalen's voice commanded through the private channel, dripping with contempt. Do it now, Vorlag, or I will have you relieved. Vorlag turned to his tactical officer. The Cathar's 4 eyes were wide, fixed on him, waiting for the command that would seal their course. The weight of the moment felt immense, a singularity of choice. He was a creature of duty, of honor, of the old ways, and the old ways demanded that a challenge be met. Tactical, Vorlag said, his voice heavy as neutronium. Target their forward section. A low-yield disruptor pulse. Non-critical systems only. Fire on my mark. He turned back to the hololith. Ambassador Rostova's image remained, her expression now one of solemn resignation. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, not to him, but to someone unseen on her own bridge. Mark, Vorlag commanded. The indomitable will asterisk shuddered almost imperceptibly as a lance of pure, chaotic energy, a beautiful and terrible thing of violet light, erupted from its forward cannon. It was a weapon designed to tear apart the very fabric of matter, to unmake armor and boil away circuitry. Even at this low power, it should have been enough to cripple the unshielded human ship, to send it spinning and dark into the void. The disruptor beam crossed the distance in less than a second, but it never reached its target. The human ship, the asterisk silence asterisk, did not raise a shield. It did not evade. It did something else. A low, resonant hum, a sound that was not a sound but a feeling, washed over the bridge of the asterisk indomitable will asterisk. It was not an attack. It was a presence. A wave of something utterly alien passed through the hull, through the crew, through Vorlag himself, and in that instant the universe changed. Vorlag did not see the disruptor beam dissipate. He did not hear the panicked cries of his tactical officer. He was somewhere else. He was on the bridge of the silence asterisk. He felt the cool, recycled air on his non-existent human skin. He felt the subtle vibration of the deck beneath his feet. He could feel the quiet, disciplined focus of the human crew around him, a web of interconnected thoughts and emotions. He felt Ambassador Rostova's deep, profound sorrow that violence was their first contact. He felt the quiet anxiety of the young ensign at the helm, a fear not for his own life, but that their mission might fail. He felt the collective weight of their purpose, the desperate, unyielding hope that they could stop the bloodshed before it began. And then he felt what they felt as they watched the violet beam of the disruptor cannon approach their ship. He felt a primal, gut-wrenching terror, the instinctual fear of imminent, violent annihilation. He felt the sudden, vivid memory of a sun-drenched park on a planet he had never seen, a memory of a child's laughter that belonged to one of the human crewmen, a precious thing about to be extinguished. He felt the collective gasp of 100 minds bracing for an impact that would turn them all into superheated plasma and shattered memories. The experience lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that fraction of a second, Vorlag lived an entire lifetime of someone else's fear. He staggered back, his 4 eyes wide with a horror he had never known. He looked at his tactical officer, the one who had pressed the firing stud. The Cathar warrior was on his knees, his powerful frame trembling. His mandibles were chattering, and a low, guttural moan escaped him. He was clutching his head, his mind shattered by the psychic backlash of the act he had just committed. He had not just fired a weapon, he had been forced to experience the terror of the one he had fired it upon. On the main view screen, the disruptor beam had simply vanished a few kilometers from the silence asterisk S-Who. LL unraveled into harmless cosmic radiation. The human ship floated there, serene and untouched, its soft light a silent, damning indictment. The bridge of the asterisk indomitable will asterisk was a tomb of shocked silence. The crew stood frozen at their stations, their faces masks of confusion and a new, dawning dread. They had all felt it, a faint echo of the empathy wave that had fully struck Vorlag and the tactical officer. They had felt a flicker of the alien's terror. Vorlag slowly turned back to the hololith. Ambassador Rostova was still there, her expression unchanged, but her eyes, those deep human eyes, seemed to hold an ocean of ancient sadness. "As I said, Praetor," she said, her voice a gentle whisper that cut through the silence like a blade, "it was not a threat. The silence is not a warship in the way you understand it. It carries no weapons of destruction. Its single primary system is what you have just experienced. We call it a resonance field. It does not destroy, it connects. It creates a temporary synaptic bridge between an aggressor and their intended target. It forces the attacker to experience the full emotional and psychological reality of their actions." Vorlag struggled to process the words, his mind reeling from the phantom terror that still echoed in his synapses. A weapon of forced empathy. A weapon that did not kill the body but assaulted the soul, the very will to fight. It was diabolical. It was brilliant. It was a concept so alien to the Cathar way of war that it defied comprehension. You turned our own aggression into a weapon against us, he breathed, the words tasting of ash. We did not, Rostova corrected him gently. Your aggression was always a weapon against you. You simply never allowed yourselves to feel the blow. All the asterisk silence does is complete the circuit. It is not a weapon designed to win a war. It is a tool designed to make war impossible. A cold dread, far deeper and more profound than the fear of any conventional weapon, began to crystallize in Vorlag's mind. He looked at his trembling officer on the floor, at the stunned faces of his crew. How could you command an army to fight if every blow they struck inflicted a wound upon their own spirit? How could you wage a war when the price of victory was to drown in the collective terror and sorrow of your defeated enemy? Lord Admiral Kalen's face was still on his private view screen, his expression now one of utter disbelief and rage. What was that? What sorcery is this? Praetor, report. Annihilate them. Full power overwhelm their trickery. But Vorlag knew with a certainty that chilled him to his very core that it would be useless. Firing one weapon had nearly broken his gunner. Firing the ship's entire arsenal would be an act of mass suicide, a psychic cataclysm that would shatter the sanity of his entire crew. They would become gibbering wrecks, lost in a storm of second-hand terror. He finally understood the ship's name. It was not the silence of death. It was the silence that falls after a profound, world-altering truth has been spoken. The silence of a mind that can no longer justify its own violence. Lord Admiral, Vorlag said, his voice heavy with the weight of a dawning, terrible revelation. We cannot attack this ship. We cannot. He severed the private channel before Kalen could reply, turning his full attention back to the human ambassador. His posture was no longer that of a conqueror, but of a student before a master of some arcane, incomprehensible art. What do you want? He asked, the question a surrender. Ambassador Rostova's gaze softened. We want nothing, Praetor. We offer something, a different way. A silence in which you and the silent hegemony can finally hear one another, not as adversaries, but as what you truly are, fellow travelers in a vast and often dark universe. We are broadcasting the nature of our system to the silent fleet as we speak. The choice of what to do next still belongs to you both, but now you will make that choice with understanding. Vorlag stood there for a long time, the silence on his own bridge stretching into an eternity. He looked at the serene, glowing form of the human ship, and he finally understood. The humans had not built a warship. They had built an answer, an end to the very idea of war, and with that single, elegant, terrifying creation they had just rendered every fleet, every weapon, every military doctrine in the galaxy obsolete. They had not come to fight. They had come to change the rules of existence itself. The report from Praetor Vorlag sent a shockwave through the Cathar Imperium. His account of the empathy weapon was met first with disbelief, then with furious accusations of trickery, psychological warfare, and cowardice. Lord Admiral Kalen, his pride scorched, became the leading voice of the hardliners. He addressed the grand convocation, his holographic form radiating a cold, focused rage that resonated with TH. Warrior caste. It is a soul killer, Kalen declared, his voice echoing in the vast, shadowed chamber. A cowardly, dishonorable device that bypasses the strength of our hulls and the courage of our warriors to poison the mind itself. It is a plague of the spirit, a weapon of fear masquerading as enlightenment. They have found a weakness not in our ships, but in the very compassion that we Cathar hold for our own kind, and they have twisted it into a shackle. Are we to be ruled by fear? Are we to be paralyzed by the terror of our enemies? This is not strength. This is a slave's weapon. His rhetoric was potent. The Cathar were a proud people, their entire society built upon a framework of honor, strength, and the glorious death in battle. The human weapon was anathema to all they held sacred. It denied them the honor of combat, the purity of a direct confrontation. It reduced their mighty armadas to useless collections of metal, their warriors to trembling children afraid of the phantoms in their own minds. Kalen argued that to capitulate to such a weapon was to accept the end of the Cathar way of life. Vorlag, recalled to the capital to give his testimony, stood against the tide. He was no longer the same being who had left for the front. The experience aboard the Asterisk Indomitable will Asterisk had fundamentally altered him. He had felt the alien, and in it, he had recognized a shared, universal spark of life that his culture's doctrines had long taught him to ignore. It is not a soul killer, it is a soul revealer, Vorlag countered, his voice steady despite the hostile glares of his peers. It does not create fear, it reveals the fear that is the true and ugly heart of every act of violence. We speak of honor in battle, but what honor is there in extinguishing a life that feels, that hopes, that remembers a sun on its homeworld, just as we do? The humans have not shackled us. They have simply held up a mirror, and we are horrified by the reflection of what we have always been. His words were met with angry shouts. He was accused of being corrupted, his mind broken by the human's psychic attack. But a few of the elder praetors listened in silence, their ancient eyes thoughtful. They, like Vorlag, had seen enough of war's cyclical nature to wonder if there was not a deeper truth in his words. The debate raged, polarizing the Imperium. The warrior castes and the young, ambitious lords sided with Kalen, demanding a military solution. They proposed a strategy of overwhelming the human ship with automated drones and long-range kinetic strikes, attacks that could be launched by machines or by crews shielded from the weapon's effects, sacrificing a few to save the honor of the many. But the Cylon hegemony had also received the humans' message. Their response was one of cautious, deeply intrigued silence. They, a more mercantile and pragmatic civilization, saw the implications immediately. A tool that could enforce peace, a weapon that made war an act of self-torture. The economic and political ramifications were staggering. They ceased their fleet's advance, holding their position and entering into a period of intense internal debate. The grand confrontation Kalen had planned for was now indefinitely postponed, not by a threat, but by a question. This inaction from their ancient enemies only further enraged the Cathar war faction. To them, it was proof of the Cylons' cowardice and the humans' corrosive influence. Kalen, using his authority as Lord Admiral, declared the situation a matter of supreme military urgency, overriding the divided convocation. He would lead the Grand Armada himself. He would not engage the human ship directly. He would proceed to the planned battlefield and force the Cylons into an engagement. If the human ship interfered, he would deal with it then, with the full, focused might of the entire Cathar fleet. His plan was simple: create a crisis so large and so violent that the philosophical questions raised by the humans would be rendered moot by the bloody reality of war. And so the two vast fleets, the Cathar and the Cylon, finally met. It was a sight that would have been immortalized in the epics of a dozen worlds. On one side, the dark, menacing blades of the Cathar warships, a fleet built for conquest, stretching across the starfield like a forest of jagged iron. On the other, the polished, sweeping curves of the Cylon vessels, ships designed as much for commerce as for combat, gleaming like a swarm of silver insects. Between them, a gulf of black space, pregnant with the promise of unimaginable violence. And in the exact center of that gulf, a single point of pale, unwavering light, the Cylon's asterisk. Lord Admiral Kalen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the asterisk fist of the ancestors. He was a figure of pure, unyielding resolve. He had ordered his bridge crew to be fitted with psychic dampeners, experimental technology designed to mitigate the human weapon's effects. He did not know if they would work, but it was a defiance he had to make. "All ships," he broadcast across the fleet, his voice a low, hard command. "Target the hegemony line. On my mark, we will fire a single, coordinated volley. We will remind the galaxy that the spirit of a Cathar warrior cannot be broken by parlor tricks and phantoms. We will burn this human-bred cowardice from the stars." From the Cylon's asterisk, a single open transmission was sent, broadcast to every ship in both fleets. It was the calm, measured voice of Ambassador Eva Rostova. "This is the Terran Confederacy vessel asterisk Cylon's asterisk," she said, her voice devoid of threat or plea. It was simply a statement. "The choice to engage remains yours. We will not interfere with your free will. We will not fire a single shot. Our purpose is only to ensure that you, the Cathar and the Cylon, fully comprehend the consequences of your actions. The field is now active. Proceed as you see fit." Kalen's mandible tightened. "A final empty threat. They dare to lecture us on consequence." He turned to his tactical officer. "Signal the fleet. Prepare to fire." Across the Cathar armada, thousands of weapon ports opened. Energy conduits hummed with unimaginable power. Targeting locks painted the Cylon ships in brackets of deadly light. The Cylons, seeing the escalation, mirrored the action, their own weapons coming online, their defensive shields flaring to life. The moment was stretched taut, the silence of the void about to be shattered by a storm of fire and death. "Fire!" Kalen commanded, the word a release of a lifetime of martial pride. The Cathar fleet unleashed hell. A wave of energy and matter, so vast and powerful it would have scoured the surface of a continent, erupted from their ships. It was a testament to the Imperium's power, a declaration of their unbending will. And then the universe answered. The resonance field of the silence expanded in a silent, invisible wave, moving at the speed of light. It washed over the Cathar fleet in the same microsecond that their weapons discharged. It was not like the gentle touch Vorlag had experienced. This was the full, untamed power of the human device, amplified to encompass an entire armada. On the bridge of the asterisk fist of the ancestors' asterisk, Lord Admiral Kalen was thrown into a reality that was not his own. The psychic dampeners failed utterly, melting under a load they were never designed to bear. He was no longer a Cathar admiral. He was a young Cylon communications tech on the bridge of the cruiser Stardust Drifter Asterisk. He felt her heart pound with a terror so pure and absolute it stole his breath. He saw through her eyes the approaching wall of Cathar weapon fire, a beautiful, horrific aurora of certain death. He felt her desperate, silent prayer to a god he did not know, a plea for the survival of her shipmates, for her bonded partner back on their homeworld, for a future she would now never have. He felt her life, her memories, her love, her fear, all of it, a universe of experience, in the instant before it was to be annihilated. And it was not just her. He felt them all. Every Cathar on every ship was plunged into the collective consciousness of the Cylon crews they had just targeted. The warrior at the weapons console felt the quiet resignation of the Cylon shield operator facing an unwinnable onslaught. The Cathar engine master felt the frantic panic of his Cylon counterpart trying to coax one last burst of speed from his drives. The captains, the pilots, the medics, the lowest-ranking deckhands, they all felt it. They experienced in one simultaneous, horrific, and profoundly intimate moment the personhood of their enemy. They felt the Cylons' love for their families, their loyalty to their comrades, their fear of the cold, final dark. And across the void, the Cylons, who had fired their own retaliatory volleys, felt the same. They were flooded with the grim, honor-bound determination of the Cathar warriors, the weight of their ancient traditions, their deep-seated belief in the righteousness of their cause, their own buried fears of oblivion. The weapon fire from both fleets went wide. Gunners, their minds reeling, instinctively aborted their targeting locks. Pilots, overwhelmed by a sudden, crippling empathy for those they were about to kill, veered their ships off course. The initial, glorious volley of the Cathar armada, the great cleaving blow that was meant to shatter the Cylon line, dissipated into the empty space between the two fleets, a harmless and pathetic light show. A silence fell. A silence deeper than any Vorlag had ever imagined. It was not the absence of sound, but the presence of a vast, shared consciousness. The comm channels, which should have been alive with battle cries and damage reports, were filled with stunned whispers, with choked sobs, with the sound of hardened warriors weeping at their stations. On his flagship, Lord Admiral Kalen collapsed to his knees, the arrogance, the pride, the rage, it had all been scoured from him, replaced by a devastating, soul-crushing understanding. He had just lived 10,000 lives and died 10,000 deaths. He had looked into the heart of his enemy and found not a monster to be slain, but a mirror of himself. The war was over. It had ended in the instant it began. The two greatest fleets in the quadrant drifted in the dark, their weapons silent, their crews shattered and reborn. The galaxy, which had been holding its breath for the coming storm, went silent. A silence not of fear of humanity's power, but of awe at its wisdom. A silence of introspection, of reevaluation, of a sudden, shocking, and universal comprehension. The game had been changed forever. In the aftermath, Vorlag met with Ambassador Rostova once more. This time it was not as adversaries, but as equals in the dawn of a new age. They met aboard the Silence Asterisk, in a simple, quiet room that was more a meditative chamber than a diplomatic office. The air was calm, the light soft. Vorlag, now the de facto leader of a humbled and profoundly changed Cathar Imperium, looked at the human woman with an emotion he could not have named before his encounter with her ship, reverence. "Why?" Vorlag asked, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. "Why would you do this? You could have used this power to rule. To become the masters of this galaxy. No one could have stood against you. Why give us this choice? Why show us this mercy?" Ambassador Rostova looked out of the viewport at the two fleets, which were now engaged in the first tentative, peaceful communications in their shared history. A rescue vessel from a Cathar cruiser was assisting a Cylon frigate that had suffered a minor system failure during the aborted battle maneuvers. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Because mastery is not our goal, Praetor Vorlag," she said softly. "Survival is. We did not invent this technology, we discovered it." Vorlag's four eyes widened. "Discovered it. Our species is inquisitive," Rostova explained, a faint, sad smile on her lips. "We dig in the dirt of dead worlds. We listen to the whispers between the stars. On a barren moon in a forgotten system, we found a repository, a data cache left behind by a civilization that vanished eons ago. A people we have come to call the first architects." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It was not a star chart. It was a complex waveform, a signal of immense complexity and age. "This was in the cache," she continued. It is a blueprint of sorts, the principles behind the resonance field, the technology of the silence asterisk, but it was not a weapon they designed for conquest. It was a tool of last resort, a key to unlock a door to unity. Unity against what? Vorlag asked, a new, cold apprehension beginning to form within him. Rostova's expression grew grave, the deep sadness Vorlag had first seen in her eyes returning with profound force. She changed the display. The waveform was replaced by another signal, this one faint, distorted, and pulsing with a strange, rhythmic hunger. This was also in the cache, she said. A warning, a signal they recorded before they fell. It comes from outside our galaxy. From the absolute dark between the great cosmic islands. We do not fully understand what it represents. The first architects called it the static, or the devourer of thought. It is not a fleet. It is not an empire. The data we have managed to translate suggests it is a form of non-physical, disembodied consciousness, a composite intelligence that travels the void and consumes. Consumes what? Vorlag breathed, his body suddenly cold. Consciousness itself, Rostova answered, her voice barely a whisper. It absorbs sentient life, not the bodies but the minds, the memories, the souls. It adds them to its collective and then moves on, leaving behind worlds of mindless biological automata and a profound, echoing silence. The first architects believed this entity is drawn to psychic noise, to the turmoil of conflict, of war, of galactic-scale strife. The very thing our galaxy is so full of. Vorlag looked from the terrifying, pulsing signal to the face of the human ambassador. He saw not the calm diplomat of their first encounter, but a being shouldering a burden so immense it was nearly unimaginable. The humans were not arrogant newcomers. They were Paul Revere, riding through the night to warn of a coming apocalypse. The first architects created the resonance field technology too late, Rostova concluded, her voice heavy with the weight of a long-dead civilization's failure. They could not unify their own people in time. They were consumed, but they left behind their final, desperate hope, a tool to force unity upon those too proud or too blind to seek it themselves, a way to silence the squabbles of children before their noise. Attracted the true monster in the dark. We built the silence not for you or the silence or for any petty border dispute. We built it for what is coming. A profound understanding crashed over Vorlag, a wave of insight that dwarfed even what he had felt on the bridge of his ship. The human gambit, the risk they had taken. They had placed themselves between two warring empires, not out of hubris, but out of a desperate, calculated necessity. They needed to end the galaxy's endless wars, to forge a unified front, because they knew that the petty conflicts that had defined galactic history were nothing more than a dinner bell ringing out across the intergalactic void. He looked out the window again at the Cathar and Silent ships, no longer enemies, but now something else. Allies, neighbors, he did not know, but they were silent. The galaxy was silent, and it was not the silence of fear or of peace. It was the silence of a room where everyone has just realized they are not alone. The signal, Vorlag asked, his voice hoarse. The Devourer's signal. It is getting stronger, Rostova confirmed, her dark eyes meeting his, and it is getting closer. Vorlag stood there, a being of an ancient and proud race, and felt for the first time truly and utterly small. His people's long and bloody history, their glorious wars, their hard-won empire, it was all just a prelude. The real war, the war for the soul of every living thing in the galaxy, had not even begun. And it would be fought not with disruptors and warships, but with a unified will, a shared consciousness, and with the quiet, determined, and terrifyingly prescient newcomers from the small blue world called Earth leading the way. The silence was not an end. It was the beginning.